I was a married woman with 3 children, and I had a secret that was destroying me from the inside out. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, while my kids were at school and my husband was at work, I wasn't running errands or meeting friends for coffee like I told everyone. I was meeting Daniel, my personal trainer, in a hotel room downtown, and what we did there had become my addiction, my escape, and eventually, my worst nightmare. My name is Rebecca, I'm 36 years old, and I live in a beautiful house in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. From the outside, my life looked perfect. My husband Mark was a successful accountant, our 3 kids, Emma, Jake, and little Sophie, were healthy and happy, and we had everything we could ever want. But perfection is just a mask we wear to hide the cracks underneath, and mine were about to shatter into a million pieces. It all started innocently enough. After Sophie was born 3 years ago, I struggled to lose the baby weight. Mark suggested I join a gym, and that's where I met Daniel. He was 28, had eyes that seemed to see right through me, and when he smiled, something inside me that had been dormant for years suddenly woke up. At first, our sessions were just about fitness. He'd correct my form, push me harder than I thought I could go, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. I felt seen. Not as someone's mother or someone's wife, but as Rebecca, a woman with desires and dreams of her own. If you're relating to this story so far, help this channel grow by hitting that subscribe button. We're working hard to reach 17,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Click that red button right now and become part of this community. The first time something shifted between us was about 6 months into our training. Mark had forgotten our anniversary. Again. He came home late, smelling like whiskey and making excuses about a client dinner. I had dressed up, made reservations at our favorite restaurant, and sat alone at our dining table watching the candles burn down to nothing. The next morning at the gym, I must have looked devastated because Daniel asked what was wrong. I broke down. Right there in the middle of the weight room, I cried in front of this man who was practically a stranger, and he held me. Just held me. And God help me, I didn't want him to let go. Things escalated slowly after that. Lingering touches during our sessions. Text messages that started professional but gradually became more personal. He'd ask about my day, really ask, and actually listen to my answers. Mark hadn't asked me how I was doing in months, maybe years. With Daniel, I felt like I mattered. Like I was more than just the person who packed lunches and did laundry and made sure everyone else's life ran smoothly while mine stood completely still. The first time we kissed was in his car after a training session. Rain was pouring down outside, and we were talking about our dreams. I told him I'd always wanted to write a novel, that before I got married and had kids, I was studying creative writing in college. He looked at me with such intensity and said, "Then why did you stop?" And I realized I didn't have a good answer. I just stopped. Stopped dreaming. Stopped being myself. And then his lips were on mine, and I was drowning in a feeling I'd forgotten existed. Desire. Pure, unbridled, selfish desire. Not for someone else's happiness or comfort, but for mine. We tried to stop. God knows we tried. We'd have these tearful conversations about how wrong it was, how we couldn't do this. But then Tuesday would come around, or Thursday, and I'd find myself driving to that hotel on 7th Street, room 312, like I was on autopilot. And for those 2 hours, I wasn't a mother who forgot to sign permission slips or a wife who faked enthusiasm in bed. I was just Rebecca, a woman who felt wanted and beautiful and completely, recklessly alive. Your subscription really helps us continue sharing these real stories. We're so close to 17,000 subscribers, and you clicking that subscribe button right now would mean the world. Join us on this journey. But secrets have a weight to them, and mine was getting heavier every day. I started lying more, creating elaborate stories about where I'd been. I'd come home from seeing Daniel and immediately jump in the shower, washing away the evidence like Lady Macbeth trying to clean blood from her hands. The guilt was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. Mark and I had become strangers living in the same house. We had conversations about mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences, but nothing real. Nothing that touched the loneliness that lived inside me like a second skeleton. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday in late September, the air just starting to turn crisp with autumn. I'd just left Daniel at the hotel and was driving home when my phone rang. It was Emma's school. She'd had an accident during recess, fallen off the monkey bars, and they thought her arm might be broken. The panic that seized me was instant and absolute. I raced to the school, my heart hammering, and found my baby girl crying in the nurse's office, her arm at an odd angle. At the hospital, while they were taking Emma back for x-rays, Mark showed up. He'd left an important meeting to be there, his face pale with worry. And as we sat together in that sterile waiting room, both of us terrified for our daughter, I saw him. Really saw him for the first time in months. The gray hairs at his temples that hadn't been there before. The worry lines around his eyes. The way his hands shook slightly as he held his coffee. This was the father of my children. The man I'd promised to love in sickness and health, for better or worse. And what had I done to us? Emma's arm was broken, but not badly. They put her in a bright purple cast that she actually seemed excited about once the initial shock wore off. That night, after we'd gotten her settled at home with her siblings fussing over her and asking to sign her cast, Mark pulled me aside. "We need to talk," he said, and my blood turned to ice. Did he know? Had someone seen me? Had I left some evidence I'd overlooked? Press subscribe if you want to know what happens next. We're building something special here with 17,000 subscribers as our goal. And you're a huge part of that. Click that button and don't miss what comes next in this story. But Mark didn't know about Daniel. At least, not yet. What he wanted to talk about was us. He said he'd been feeling the distance between us, that we'd lost something precious and he wanted to fight to get it back. He suggested couples therapy, date nights, anything to reconnect. And as he spoke, tears streaming down his face, telling me he still loved me and didn't want to lose me, I felt something crack open inside my chest. This good man, this devoted father, was fighting for our marriage while I'd already checked out. While I'd been betraying him twice a week in a hotel room that smelled like cheap air freshener and my own guilt. I told Mark I'd think about it. That was the coward's way out, I know. What I should have done was confess everything right then. But I couldn't form the words. Instead, I texted Daniel that night after everyone was asleep. I told him we had to end things. That I couldn't do this anymore. He called me immediately, his voice desperate, saying he loved me. That he'd fallen in love with me. And those words that should have filled me with joy or at least validation instead made me feel sick. Because if he loved me, this wasn't just an affair anymore. It was real. And real things have real consequences. We agreed to meet one last time to say goodbye properly. I knew it was a terrible idea even as I agreed to it. But I felt like I owed him that much. Owed us that much. One final moment before I tried to piece my broken marriage back together. We met at the hotel, room 312, on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd told Mark I had a dentist appointment. Another lie to add to the mountain of lies I'd built. Daniel was waiting for me, and the moment I walked in, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple goodbye. He'd brought wine, my favorite kind that I'd mentioned months ago, and there were roses on the nightstand. He'd planned something, and my stomach knotted with dread and something else I didn't want to name. He held me, told me we could make this work. That he'd wait for me if I needed time. That we could move away together, start fresh somewhere new. Portland, maybe, or Denver. Somewhere no one knew us. And for one insane moment, I actually considered it. Pictured myself in a different life with this man who looked at me like I hung the moon. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, show your support by subscribing to our channel. 17,000 subscribers is our goal. And every single one matters. Hit that subscribe button and be part of this community. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. She'd sent me a picture of a drawing she'd made at school. It was our family, all 5 of us holding hands in front of our house, with a rainbow overhead and "I love my family" written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. I stared at that picture, at those stick figures that represented everything I was about to destroy, and reality crashed over me like a wave. What was I doing? What had I become? I told Daniel no. Told him I couldn't see him anymore, not even as friends, not even as trainer and client. I had to cut this out of my life completely if I had any hope of saving my marriage. He got angry then, angrier than I'd ever seen him. Said I'd led him on, made him fall in love with me, and now I was just going to walk away like he meant nothing. And he was right. I had done all of those things. I'd been selfish and cruel and destructive. The guilt was suffocating. I left that hotel room for what I promised myself would be the last time, got in my car, and just drove. I didn't go home. Instead, I ended up at this little park on the edge of Charlotte where Mark and I used to go when we were dating. Back when everything was simple and full of possibility. I sat on a bench and cried until I had no tears left, mourning the person I used to be and terrified of the person I'd become. That night, I almost told Mark everything. We were lying in bed, and he'd reached over to hold my hand, something he hadn't done in months, and the words were right there on my tongue. But fear stopped me. Fear of losing everything. My children, my home, my marriage. Fear of seeing the love in Mark's eyes turn to disgust. So I swallowed the confession and told myself I'd take this secret to my grave. That I'd be the best wife and mother from that moment forward, and somehow that would make up for what I'd done. For 3 weeks, I kept that promise to myself. I deleted Daniel's number. Blocked him on social media. Started seeing a therapist on my own to work through why I'd sabotaged my marriage. Mark and I began couples counseling, and slowly, painfully, we started talking again. Really talking. About our fears and disappointments and the million tiny ways we'd failed each other. It wasn't easy, and there were nights I'd wake up at 3 in the morning drenched in guilt sweat, but I was trying. I was really trying. We're working so hard to reach 17,000 subscribers, and your subscription helps us keep sharing these powerful stories. Click that subscribe button right now and don't miss any updates. Your support is everything to us. Then came Halloween night. We'd taken the kids trick-or-treating around our neighborhood. Emma was a princess, Jake was Spider-Man, and Sophie was the world's cutest pumpkin. Mark and I walked behind them, holding hands, almost feeling like ourselves again. Almost feeling like we might actually make it through this. That's when I saw Daniel's car parked across the street. Just sitting there. Watching us. My blood ran cold. He'd found out where I lived. How long had he been watching? What did he want? I made an excuse about forgetting my phone and doubled back, walking over to his car. He rolled down the window, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "Nice family you've got there," he said, and the way he said it sounded like a threat. I told him he needed to leave, that this was over and he was scaring me. He laughed, this bitter hollow sound, and said, "You think you can just use me and throw me away? You're going to regret this, Rebecca. I promise you that." He drove off, tires squealing, and I stood there shaking. What had I done? This man I'd trusted, who I'd been intimate with, who knew all my secrets, was now unstable and angry and knew where my children slept at night. The danger I'd put my family in by being selfish crashed over me like a tsunami. I couldn't tell Mark, couldn't explain why this strange man was threatening us, not without confessing everything. I felt trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Someone slashed the tires on my car. Our home security camera caught a figure in a hoodie standing at the end of our driveway at 2 in the morning, just watching the house. My personal email account got hacked, and someone sent bizarre messages to my contacts. I knew it was Daniel. Had to be. But I couldn't prove it, and I couldn't explain to Mark why someone might be targeting me without unraveling every lie I'd told. The paranoia was eating me alive. Every time my phone rang, I jumped. Every time a car drove slowly past our house, I tensed. I'd lie awake at night listening to every creak and groan of our old house, terrified that Daniel would do something to hurt my family to get back at me. The irony wasn't lost on me that in trying to feel alive, I'd created a situation that might end up destroying everything I actually cared about. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss what happens next in this intense story. We're so close to 17,000 subscribers, and clicking that red subscribe button helps us more than you know. Do it right now. Then came the night that everything fell apart. Mark and I were in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when there was a knock at the door. Mark answered it, and I heard a man's voice, Daniel's voice, asking to speak with Rebecca. My heart stopped. I walked to the door on legs that felt like they might give out any second. Daniel was standing there, looking disheveled and desperate, and he was holding an envelope. I think your wife has something she needs to tell you, he said to Mark, handing him the envelope before walking away. Mark looked at me, confusion written all over his face, and opened the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots, text messages between Daniel and me, photos of us together, hotel receipts, everything. Months of evidence of my affair laid out in glossy 8x10 prints. I watched the color drain from Mark's face as he looked through them, watched understanding dawn and then morph into this horrible wounded expression that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Mark, I started, but he held up his hand, told me not to speak. He called his sister to come watch the kids, and we sat in our car in the driveway in complete silence while we waited for her to arrive. The longest 20 minutes of my life. When she got there, looking worried and confused, Mark told her we needed to go out for a bit, and we drove. He didn't say where we were going, and I didn't ask. We ended up at a hotel, ironically enough, and got a room just so we could talk without the kids overhearing. The things he said to me in that hotel room broke something in me that I don't think will ever fully heal. He didn't yell. That might have been easier. Instead, he just asked questions in this quiet, broken voice. How long? Why? Did I love Daniel? Did I ever think about our children when I was with him? Each question was a knife, and I deserved every cut. I tried to explain, tried to make him understand the loneliness and the feeling of being invisible and the way Daniel had made me feel seen. But even as the words came out of my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. How selfish. How utterly insufficient as an explanation for destroying our family. Keep following this story by subscribing to our channel. Your subscription helps us reach our goal of 17,000 subscribers and keeps these real stories coming. Click subscribe right now. Mark told me he didn't know if he could forgive me. That the woman he'd married wouldn't have done this, and he didn't know who I was anymore. He said he needed time to think, to figure out if our marriage was even worth saving. He'd stay at his sister's place for a while. The kids would stay with me since he couldn't explain to them why Daddy was suddenly moving out. I'd done this. I'd blown up our entire life. The next morning, I had to tell our children that Daddy was going to stay with Aunt Lisa for a little bit because Mommy and Daddy were having some grown-up problems. Emma's face crumpled and she asked if we were getting divorced. I told her I didn't know, which was the truth, and that might have been the worst part. Seeing the fear and confusion in my children's eyes and knowing I'd put it there. Jake got quiet and angry, slamming his bedroom door. Even Sophie, at 3 years old, seemed to sense that something was terribly wrong. She kept asking for Daddy and crying when I couldn't give her a good answer about when he'd be home. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers' consultations that Mark insisted on, painful therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. Daniel had accomplished what he wanted. He'd blown up my life. But the thing that haunted me most was that he wasn't the villain here. I was. He'd fallen for a married woman who'd lied to him about her marriage being essentially over, who'd made him believe we had a future together. And when I'd pulled the rug out from under him, he'd reacted like a hurt, desperate person. I'd created this monster by being careless with people's hearts. Mark and I are in limbo now. We still meet with our marriage counselor twice a week, and he comes to the house to see the kids every day. Sometimes he looks at me like he's trying to find the woman he married underneath the stranger who broke his trust. Other times he looks at me with such pain that I have to turn away. I don't know if we'll survive this. Some days I think maybe we're better off apart, that I've damaged us beyond repair. Other days I look at our children and think we owe it to them to try harder, fight longer. Help us reach 17,000 subscribers by clicking that subscribe button. These stories need to be told, and your subscription makes that possible. Join our community right now. The guilt is constant, a weight I carry in my chest that makes it hard to breathe sometimes. I see a therapist 3 times a week now, working through why I made the choices I made, learning how to forgive myself even though I don't feel like I deserve forgiveness. I'm writing again, finally, channeling all this pain and regret into words on a page. It doesn't make anything better, but it helps me process the wreckage of my own making. Daniel eventually left me alone after Mark filed a restraining order. I heard through the grapevine at the gym that he moved to Atlanta, started fresh somewhere new. I hope he finds happiness. I hope he finds someone who deserves him and doesn't use him as an escape from their own unhappy life. I hope he heals from what I did to him, because despite everything, that guilt weighs on me too. The affair ended months ago, but I'm still living in the aftermath. Still picking up pieces of the bomb I set off in my own life. Emma asks me sometimes if I still love Daddy, and I tell her yes, which is true. I do love Mark. I think maybe I always did, even when I was betraying him. I just forgot how to see him clearly, forgot how to appreciate what we had while I was so focused on what we didn't have. That doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. But it's part of the truth. Some nights after the kids are asleep, I sit in our bedroom, the one I used to share with Mark, and I think about that woman who drove to the hotel every Tuesday and Thursday. She feels like a stranger to me now, someone I can't quite recognize even though I know she was me. I was so convinced I deserved that happiness, that escape, that I didn't stop to consider the price. And the price has been everything. Your subscription really makes a difference in helping us share these raw, honest stories. Click that subscribe button to help us reach 17,000 subscribers. We're counting on you to join us. Mark asked me the other day if I regretted it. Not the affair itself, but if I regretted that it happened, that we'd been forced to confront what was broken between us. And I didn't know how to answer. Because yes, I regret the pain I've caused. I regret the trauma I've inflicted on my husband and my children. I regret breaking promises and trust that might never fully be restored. But if I'm being completely honest, somewhere deep down, some part of me doesn't regret feeling alive again, even if it was wrong, even if it was destructive. And that realization, that there's a part of me that still can't fully condemn what I did, terrifies me more than anything else. We have a mediation session scheduled for next month. Mark says it's to discuss custody arrangements if we decide to separate permanently. The thought of losing my children even part-time, of having to share holidays and birthdays and watching them shuttle between 2 houses, makes me physically ill. But I understand that might be the consequence of my actions. You don't get to blow up your family and then demand they all stay in the ruins with you. I've been thinking a lot about identity lately. About how we define ourselves by our roles, wife, mother, daughter, and how sometimes those roles can swallow us whole until we forget there's a person underneath. I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong, full stop. But I understand now that I'd lost myself somewhere in the journey of becoming what everyone else needed me to be. And instead of having an honest conversation with my husband about feeling lost and lonely, instead of fighting for my marriage and myself in healthy ways, I took the coward's path and found validation in someone else's arms. There's no neat ending to this story because it's still happening. Mark and I are still in counseling. The kids are still adjusting to this new abnormal version of our family. I'm still waking up every day trying to figure out who Rebecca is when she's not running from herself or hiding in someone else's perception of her. Maybe we'll find our way back to each other. Maybe the damage is too deep and we'll end up divorced, co-parenting our children and eventually becoming strangers who once promised forever. I honestly don't know. This is your last chance to subscribe and help us hit 17,000 subscribers. These real stories matter, and so does your support. Click that red subscribe button right now and stay connected with our community. What I do know is that affairs are never just about the affair. They're about unspoken resentments and unmet needs, and the million tiny ways we fail to show up for the people we love until the distance between us becomes an ocean too wide to cross. They're about feeling invisible and grasping at anything that makes you feel real again, even if that thing is poison. And most of all, they're about the moment you realize that the price of your momentary happiness is permanent damage to the people you never wanted to hurt. So here I am, standing in the wreckage of my own making, trying to figure out if redemption is even possible. Trying to teach my children about honesty and integrity while living with the knowledge that I've failed spectacularly at both. Trying to look my husband in the eye and show him that I'm committed to change, to being better, even though I know words mean nothing after you've proven yourself untrustworthy. Trying to forgive myself for being human and flawed and capable of causing such tremendous pain. Mark came by yesterday to have dinner with the kids. After they went to bed, we sat on the back porch drinking coffee in silence. Finally, he asked me if I thought we could ever get past this, if I thought trust could be rebuilt from ashes. And I told him I didn't know, but I wanted to try if he was willing. He didn't answer. Just nodded slowly and finished his coffee before leaving. That's where we are. In this strange purgatory between together and apart, trying to decide if love is enough to overcome betrayal. The truth is, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if Mark will ultimately decide to forgive me or if he'll choose to walk away and build a new life without me in it. I don't know if my children will grow up resenting me for what I've done to our family, or if they'll eventually understand that people are complicated and flawed and capable of both tremendous love and terrible mistakes. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself or if this guilt will be my constant companion for the rest of my life. What I'm asking you now, after hearing my story, after seeing how spectacularly I destroyed my own life chasing a feeling, is this: what would you do if you were in my place? Would you keep fighting for a marriage that might be dead? Would you let go and give everyone, including yourself, the chance to start fresh? How do you live with yourself after you've become the villain in your own story? How do you move forward when you can't change the past but you're terrified of the future? I genuinely want to know. Comment below and tell me what you would do in my situation, because I'm still trying to figure it out myself.